Welcome back to the VET S.O.S podcast. Remember, you do not have to drown in a sea of transition. You grab that VET S.O.S Lifeline. We are here to help. And today, sitting on the stoop, we about to get the scoop. Oh, y'all in for some action-packed understanding on what it means to be resilient and what it means to fly high. Fly higher than how we go. Derek, usually 33,000 feet, 40,000 feet.
Yeah, we touch 40. We stay under 50 if we can, but we hit 40.
There we go. So we gotta get up there in the word. We're gonna bring that down to a nice landing. There's gonna be some turbulent thing along the way, but we're gonna give you some notes to take down to navigate through life. So let me share a little bit about this young man sitting here on, and some of y'all will be listening. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. So I'm gonna introduce you to a Naval Aviator, retired. I don't like saying retired, but that's a badge of honor too. But he is a decorated Naval Aviator, cancer warrior, and survivor. And he is the author. And this is what we're going to talk about today. The author of Unbreakable Wings. Derek is going to bring you the truth, the grit, the ups and downs what he went through that's going to help you go through yours with command presence. Derek defines what it means to have that warrior spirit. We're going to talk about times when he was in the cockpit, and to the times that he was battling in the hospital room. His story is for the leadership to jot down, to study in motion, a resilience blueprint, and a masterclass in transition. This just isn't a memoir. Derek's on a mission to share his story. And we're going to be talking about this right here, Unbreakable Wings. Chapter by chapter, we're going to give you some lessons for life, leadership, and legacy for you to jot down and keep moving forward. Don't forget, we're gonna also share how you can pick up the book and everything and add it to your collection and use it. But before we start, how you doing, Derek? I gave him a little scoop on you, but share the other part of the scoop of Derek.
Doing great, Kingsley. No, I am retired July 1st. I'm fresh out of the military, 29 years and a couple months. Flew airplanes most of my career, and now I'm just kind of trying to figure out. You can see my hair. I went from the flat top to trying to figure out what hairdos are like. I don't even have a color palette yet because I just wore flight suits, and now I have to buy different colors and polo shirts. And so, life on the other side, you miss a little bit of the camaraderie and the squadron and the flying, but you kind of get to experience what retired life is like, and I'm enjoying it every minute.
Wow. So you said 29, just shy of 3 decades, but let's talk about the young Derek that came from Wisconsin, from Wisconsin, from Madison, Wisconsin. Let's talk about that young Derek that was out there on the farm, rolling up the sleeves, waking up early, going to bed late, and doing everything in between it before you came into the military service.
Well, Wisconsin, the first thing you think of is cheese and cold, right? So a lot of that growing up. I was kind of the chunky kid. I think I referenced it in the book about my dairy farm physique, I called it. I might have been like ready for the football team, but I decided to join cross country and be a runner to lose some of that weight and be athletic. But farm life was tough. We all kind of knew each other in Wisconsin, and most of us farm kids were just kind of farm kids, and we helped each other out, neighbor to neighbor, community to community. And you wake up early, you milk the cows, and then sometimes you spend hours in that field sniffing diesel smoke while you're on the seat of that tractor, raking hay, baling hay, cutting corn, doing all the stuff. And then you go back and you're putting all the hay in the barn, right? All that chaff all over your neck, all over your hair. Long days, long hours, sweat, but it built grit. It kind of instills who you are, whether you realize it or not as a kid. You kind of learn the art of swearing a little bit on the farm when rolling around some uncles, and you learn some colorful language when things don't go well. So you not only develop grit, maybe a little personality on the side too. But, life in Wisconsin was enjoyable. I really had a great time. And, when you're young, the cold is great. Snow is fun. When you're older, maybe not so much. But Wisconsin is truly in a deep place in my heart.
So you had a journey through life. We're going to touch on your military service and stuff. I definitely want to start with your book title.
Okay.
Because we got, like I said, we gotta peel it open and go through it because you have your life journey in here.
Yep.
What made you say after you put this together, you say, you know what, I'm gonna name Unbreakable Wings, piloting the impossible journey through cancer and naval aviation.
I don't I don't know how people write books. This is my first one, and the book came well before the title. I really didn't have a title, and I struggled with a lot of different titles. And at the end of the day, it was just one of those. I'm out on a run, and I'm like, What's the book about? And I felt like the majority of the book was life trying to take my wings away or prevent me from getting them, right? And as we go through the chapters, I think that'll resonate a little bit. And so, wings definitely need to be in there to give the pilot theme, and then unbreakable just kind of was one of those terms. And life is trying to break the wings, throw me
Yeah,
away, throw me a curveball, and then the subtitle really came just to kind of give some explanation. And there's nothing I could have said that encompasses all of the stories in the book, right? So we threw a little bit of the impossible journey, which you'll see
uh-huh.
it's still impossible. I look back and still have no idea how I made it through. And then putting cancer in there is really one of the bigger milestones and challenges, and maybe resonates not just with cancer survivors, but anybody who's a challenge.
Right,
I think anybody can relate to kind of my struggles with chemo and the struggles they're going through in life. And then the naval aviation part really wraps it up about how now I'm different, right? How hard is it to be a naval aviator when you think of them as top tier medically, top tier physically? Those pilots are in the cockpit, pressure changes,
yeah,
airflow or G changes, right, as you're flying. And it really kind of was a struggle once I got through cancer of always looking back, wondering if is it going to come back. You
right.
always kind of have that person inside of you every time something itches or doesn't feel right, or you're going for your annual flight physical. Just kind of a concern.
Yeah, because you first coming into the book, it sets up like it kind of leads people in, but then, like you said, we hit the afterburners and you pull that stick and then man, we going straight up. And the first thing we talked was the shock of impact when that life drops that bomb, that diagnosis, that sudden disruption, that raw awareness. When the diagnosis hit you, what was your first reaction? Not as a leader or aviator, but just for being as a human being.
If you think about, I was in my mid to late 20s. I was full of life. I was flying airplanes. We were in Puerto Rico, and that's to Panama City, Panama. And then when they sent me from Puerto Rico, they didn't really tell me anything. So I took one sock and a pair of underwear, thinking I was just going to do a few tests and come back. And, they cut me open. I have a scar here where they took some biopsies and a bunch of other stuff that's in the book. You can read about all the
Yeah,
stuff they did before I ever hit the oncologist. And then as I'm sitting in that room, just kind of really not there, but there. And he's like, the test came back and you have Hodgkin's lymphoma. I think my first reaction was, I turned around and looked to see who he was talking to, right? Because
right,
I'm a triathlete, I'm a runner, I'm in shape. And
right.
I don't think it even hit me until he's like, you start chemo on Wednesday. And then I'm like, my
Wow.
brain just paused. And I think for like 30 seconds, like I felt like maybe I was dead inside or had no idea how to react. And then, as we left, then it was just kind of getting in my own head, wondering, well, what chemo are you going to do, right? What does that mean?
Right,
Because you only know stories. We didn't have internet back then. We couldn't just Google Hodgkin's lymphoma. We couldn't just
right.
Google cancer. We couldn't Google cancer effects. And so the unknown was actually way more frightening than anything that was known at the time. So I think shock, maybe it's even hard to go back and think about what I was thinking, because I think I was in such shock of just being displaced from the squadron and thrown off on the doorstep of, Bethesda, Maryland at a hospital. No aviator wants to be in a hospital.
Right.
So shock is probably the best word to describe it.
Yeah, and definitely as an aviator, going through different tests, and you talked about earlier, like testing G-force and all the different procedures you have to go through just to become a pilot, let alone. So you're like, man, I'm healthy. What are you talking about? I have this. Like, it's no possible way. So how did your military mindset influence your initial reaction to the news? Like, because you already had the military training, you're at your unit, and then now you get this news. So how did you fall back onto that? I call it that military, like, subconsciousness, right? Like you just started
Yep.
going into action.
Yeah, I think growing up on the farm and having that instilled drive and work ethic, and then the military training of, okay, this is a problem, right? I don't know who to leverage because I don't know anybody else that's had this problem, but I got to figure this out because there's nobody around in Bethesda, Maryland that's in the Navy that's a pilot that can help me. And so even from day one, I started doing research. What's the waivers? What do I need to do? When I get out, where am I going to go? And so I kind of detailed myself. I got into grad school. I got into a couple grad schools and then had to pick a path. And of course, some of those solutions ended up not working out. So I had to have backups, and thank God for the military training where you have a plan, you have a backup plan, you have a third plan, and sometimes you have a fourth plan. And I think the fifth plan is the one I hit. But, I had plenty of months going through chemo and kind of trying to figure that out.
Right. So in this chapter, you describe the moment everything changed. How do you lead when your own body becomes the battlefield? Like how was that? 'Cause now you have to put, being a command. So were you a command pilot or I'm trying to figure out because you have the pilot and you have the co-pilot.
Yep.
So how did you have to put that into perspective?
At the time in the plane reference, so on the P3, which I was flying, there's 3 pilots. There's 2 because we fly long hours up to 12-hour missions. 2 in the cockpit. One's the pilot in command and one's the other co-pilot. I was only co-pilot rated, so I didn't sign for the airplane. But putting that in perspective is you kind of forget about the airplane a little bit, and you're like, okay, I'm not flying now for a while. I'm down, but what's the challenge, right? So I'm flying the medical chair. And it wasn't even the destination or the journey. It was the effects, the chemo, right? The losing of the hair, the getting sick, the deterioration of the body.
Yeah.
Like every day was a new challenge to where when I woke up in the morning, I knew I wasn't dead because it hurt. It wouldn't hurt this bad, right? And my hair's falling out and everything else. And it's just one kind of challenge after the other. And I think just being sound mentally, and I'm not saying I was perfect. I doubted myself a lot. I had some real bad days, but you just got to kind of grit down and go through it. And I think that's what got me there. And a lot of the military, there's some of those days on deployment, as you know, that are bad as well. And I think some of that experience really kind of helped me push through.
And that's definitely because that's talk about that orders and chaos, right? Your mission first mindset, amongst the diagnosed, right? Like, hey, I'm co-pilot ready. I don't want to be. For me as a security force, like for me, I always say I don't want them to take away my weapon, right? I always want to be mission ready to deploy. How did you balance your personal crisis with the professional duties that didn't stop?
Yeah, the professional duties that they were at least lenient because they takes you out of the squadron. So that whole operational sense that you talk about, now they sent me to Bethesda, Maryland to what was the Naval Historical Center. And they publish magazines and they curate all of the art in the Pentagon and all the things on submarines and ships, China. They put that in a warehouse. And so, like I said, it's the historical center keeping records. And it was a desk job to help out. And so the nice thing was every Wednesday I wouldn't go in. I either had chemo or had to do blood work or CAT scans. So I worked a little bit. And to be honest, at first, I didn't know how to balance it. And then I realized the greatest thing about going through the chemo was to go to work because it got me out of my head and it got me out of that apartment building, and trying to find a place to live was a completely different story, right? That's in there too, right? So again, just a little challenge, but sometimes those little challenges just add up more than the big ones. It wasn't even the cancer. It was the side effects of the cancer, right? I had such severe itching that I couldn't even hold anything for more than 30 seconds because between the fingers itched so significantly. The bottom of my feet itched all the time. I could hardly wear shoes. And so until the chemo started to attack the tumors, that was the hardest part of the first couple months was just those kind of things, the side effects of the cancer.
Wow. So you're going through this, you have your military, you have to take off the uniform, you're going home, you're speaking with your family, your friends. What advice do you give, like someone trying to maintain that structure when everything around them just starts to feel like it's unraveling? Like, to walk us through that.
Yeah, I think, let me put you back in 1999 because I think everybody listening is from the perspective now, right? Like you don't have a cell phone, you don't have chat. I didn't take anything. So we still, I have a phone, but I didn't hook that up because I just got an apartment. And so the only thing I had was rent. And so it took me months just to establish communications other than USPS mail. Right. And so I could pick up the phone and call, but people didn't know my number because I didn't have a cell phone number. Right. And it's a new number. I'm in a new place. So people weren't finding me. So, the loneliness was the hardest part. And then slowly, once I got to reach out, I think AOL dial up online, I finally got a laptop. And then I think I got my first cell phone when I halfway through chemo. It was a Sprint, like a brick where you pulled the antenna out.
Yep.
But still, you could just dial numbers. There was no text. There was really no internet, no FaceTime. And so there was no family for me. They were all in
Mm.
Wisconsin. And when my parents visited early, they still had to go back and do jobs. And so what I'm getting at is, for anybody that's there, is nobody knows that you're hurting unless you ask. And go
Right.
out. And then when I did, people didn't know how to talk to me. They're like, "Oh, he's got
Right.
cancer. I don't want to say the wrong thing." And I
Right.
will I will tell you, my recommendation in looking back is, I just wanted, and this happened to me, and I didn't know it until it happened, is I just wanted a buddy to come over and treat me like
Like
I
a
was
normal person.
normal.
Yeah.
Bring a pizza and a blockbuster movie back then, and we'll throw it in the VCR and we'll watch, whatever it was. Because I just didn't want to be the cancer survivor. I didn't want to be the cancer
Right.
patient, right? I just wanted to be the dude that sat there and maybe have a beer and just, talk about what guys talk about when they're, hanging out
Yeah.
watching a movie.
Sports, whatever. Yeah. Just talking.
So,
Yeah. Just jaw
now,
jack.
so that was 1999, very much more difficult, I think, than today. But, today, tell people it's okay to talk. Tell them to reach out anytime, and and then if you're the sick one or you're the one that's struggling, you'll let them know if it's not a good day. But, feel free to ask. Invite people to go out. You almost have to kind of involve the community to support you a little bit. And it sounds intuitive, but I think if just a little courage goes a long way, and people will go bending over backwards to support. And I think you need that. I think you need the warmth. Like me going to work was really kind of family, just to have conversations and keep my mind out, because I was going crazy sitting in my room thinking about, is this it? Is tomorrow my last day? Right? You can really kind of drive yourself into a basement if you don't get out.
Right. And that's where you weave into the next chapter, chapter 3. I talk about it, and when I was reading through, I was like, wow, this is like mental warfare, your internal combat. Like, you warn with yourself. You're looking at them like, man, I wonder what people are saying, what people are doing. Like, I wish everybody just treat me regular. Like, I'm okay. I'm still breathing. It's like fighting, fighting that new kind of enemy, right? And what way does your pilot trainer equip you to fight against cancer?
I don't know if anything really does, right? The
Mm.
struggle. You'd like to think it does. I think the pilot training itself has less to do with a plane and more with like the way calculus trains your mind,
Right.
right? The checklists, the kind of scan, keeping on an altitude, setting an altitude. You have to climb to a certain thing, fly a certain airspeed. There's limits and expectations, and I think as you go through cancer, you set these then for yourself, right? For me, it was, okay, I got to get out of this somehow. Um, because I don't know what the last day is going to look like. I can't predict it, or if I'm going to make it to the last day. But if I do, I got to have a plan. And so that's when I started looking at grad school. I knew I couldn't fly for 2 years after chemo. I researched that and figured out, like, they want to make sure I'm cancer free. And so
Right.
what's my plan? Because if I leave it up to the Navy, I'm going to be in Afghanistan or,
Right.
somewhere I don't want to
Yeah.
be. And so
Right.
I took the GREs. I made it into the University of Florida. I had a program at the time that I made it into, and then Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey. And, but you're also having a struggle, because taking a GRE with some chemo brain was really hard. There's a big story in there about how I is having a tough time remembering
Yeah.
and some other things. But that military, that training, just kind of that methodical thought, process by process along the way, and just ensuring that there is something ahead of you. So you're thinking, like we think ahead of the airplane, so you're not behind the airplane. You're always thinking next step, when you need to descend, when you need to climb, what's the next thing you think to hear. And I think that really helped me figure out month to month is, okay, my next milestone is that CAT scan. Let's hope the tumors look less. Let's hope there's improvement, and then hopefully I can get out of here in the 6 months. And as you know from the book, it didn't happen that way. It was another hurdle, right? Hit me
Yeah.
right in the head. And there I am, taken from like what I thought was my peak right back down to the basement. And then I had to climb my way all out again. So
When I was reading, I was like, man, I said, there was get Mike Tyson punch after Mike Tyson punch. He stood up, was wobbling, and got Mike Tyson punch again. And, you talk about mission first, even in healing. How did you prioritize others while fighting for yourself? Because I know, like you say, you wanted to just be like, you just wanted to be there, right? Like,
yeah.
you give yourself for others, but at the time you was trying to recover. Because, I told you about, I have family members that have, 2 times surviving stuff. And when they was going through chemo, they made them very weak after, but they was trying to still do the same thing. So how did you navigate through that?
I think it was self-inflection and how, when
Mm.
you look in the mirror, how do you see yourself, right? I could, and to put it harshly, is I could be the victim or I could be the survivor. And maybe I
Right.
didn't choose binary, like it was 1 or 0, but I think I just choose to, like, when I saw people, like, I didn't want to tell my story maybe because I didn't
Uh,
know how to answer the questions. And so when I did meet people, I was really into them. What are you doing? What's exciting, right? Because I know that if I didn't say anything, they would see my bald head and my eyebrows were gone, and I was
right.
I was orange in color because the chemo was bright
Chemo,
red,
yep.
dyeing my skin orange. And so I looked funny, right? And so they're not going to talk to me if I don't go talk to them. And I kind of, that was just one of those go through the checklist. What's wrong with the scenario? How do I fix it? Okay, if I meet people, I need to go talk to them and just initiate conversation. And then everything flowed fine. And when I did have a few friends of mine from flight school came up, there's a base in Maine. And so they went through Bethesda on the way. And,
Uh,
one really saved my life one day when I was in self-doubt. And I'm not going to say this peachy, this on this podcast, everything's peachy and we all make it, but at the
no,
time you don't know, right? Like
right,
I'm like, I
right,
kind of gave up and I'm like, this isn't going to work. And this is end. And you don't know how to like start thinking about goodbye. And you don't want to start thinking about goodbye. And that's when he
right,
kind of came and took me out to an Orioles game and we just had a day like it was any other day. And I'm like, that's how I need to live this life, regardless of what the time is left. Regardless if I have cancer, I get hit by a bus tomorrow, right? I need to
right,
live life every day. And so I think that answers your question is, how did I see myself? I'm like, I just see myself as a guy that just needs to live every day, whether that's 2 days from now or if that's 10, 20, 30, 40 years from now. And I think that's
right.
how I've kind of lived and kind of helped me write the book for other people instead of writing it about me.
Right. And that's why I shared with you earlier. I was like, I tell myself, and I used to, oh wow, that's cool. I said, hey man, just make it to tomorrow. Cause in my mind, tomorrow never comes because tomorrow turns into today, right?
Yep.
So if I make it to tomorrow, it's today. So I know that navigating the unknown, like the resilience under fire and like, man, is tomorrow gonna be day? So you have faith, you have fear, you have mental endurance. And all of this stuff is coming probably like a long sleepless night. So, kind of sitting up in the middle of the night, like wondering, man, what I have to do. How did you maintain control where everything around you feels like it was unpredictable?
When you say sleepless nights, that's not in a bed. That's usually in the bathroom, laying on the cold tile floor next to the toilet.
Right.
And so those are the sleepless nights. And the irony is, if you've ever seen Castaway with Tom Hanks, and he has Wilson, the ball,
Wilson, the ball, yes.
didn't understand that. And then another friend, she was in town with her parents lived close, and they were very helpful. Both doctors really helped me at the end when I was going downhill fast. She bought me a gift and had this little teddy bear, little dog, sorry, little plush dog. And didn't think much about it at the time, threw it in the back of the toilet because I spend most of my time kind of in the bathroom. And I found that I was starting to have conversations with that dog. Right. Cause so like in the hardest time, I just like, at work, I needed someone to talk to, but when I'm sitting there having a tough time, it was maybe more of a
Right.
complaining tool. I would just complain to it. It never talked back, but
Right.
as dumb as that sounds, to answer your question is sometimes you just put yourself in the moment and you work with the tools you have in that moment. And to me, it was, sitting on the cold floor, talking to my plush dog sometimes just to get through a minute or an hour or the night, right? And then the next day would be a little normal, but it helped me just get through some of those tough times in the middle of the night.
Right. And then what advice would you give, like navigating the uncertainty and the transition life, right? Because this is part of
Yeah.
your transition, right? So now you're doing, because in your mind, you're like, man, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to continue serving, right? Like this
Yep.
is so now you're thinking about that transition, like, wow, okay, do I go back to the farm? Do I, stay in like how is this medical situation is tearing up my body? I'm still fighting it because chemo is hard on the body. Like I said, I have I was on the support end of that, and I just see the transition of that. So how is that uncertain that transition life start to like? Okay, how do you get it together?
I think the today's age, the social media sets unrealistic expectations on a
Right,
lot of things, right? And now you see a lot of people, cancer survivors, and they show them ringing a bell, right? And so today's you think you're going to walk out of the hospital and there's going to be all these streamers and parades and and you get to ring this bell and your family's there and you walk out and it's a big celebration. And again, social media has created that expectation. I didn't have
right,
social media. I didn't know. And so to answer your question, I didn't know how to transition. And when I sat in front of the doctor, I had to do those extra 4 and I was done. I don't think I could have done another one. I was really at that point. And he looks at me, he's like, okay, you're done.
wow,
That's it. That's how it ended. Just like that.
that was it.
Just like I sat there for that second, just you're done. And he walked out and I
Wow.
just sat there like that's it. I don't know if it's going to come back tomorrow. I don't know what to do afterwards. I don't know about my
Right.
aftercare. But I didn't really set any expectations. I thought success in my mind was how I defined it. So for you,
Right.
is success to me was being able to walk out of the hospital. Whether, I didn't need the bells and
Right.
whistles. I didn't even know about ringing a bell. I was just
Right.
happy to hear the doctor saying it looks good. I mean, I'm like, I've been waiting 9 months to get to that point.
Right.
And it just kind of lets you breathe a little bit after, reflecting back on all the pain
Right.
of every 6 hour, 8 hour chemo treatment and all the nonsense. And from there, I just got in my truck, I kind of moved out and I just started driving west to Monterey. And that was the weirdest part in my mind for that transition, is I really didn't think about what to think about. And so my mind
Right.
thought about everything, right? More importantly, I kind of thought about what happens if it comes back. How do I get back in the cockpit? But,
Right.
you start off with you're eating your elephant one bite at a time, right?
One
That's
bite
kind of
at a
what it
time.
was. Just get to the next hotel, right? And then, okay, now
Right.
let's think about when I get to California, and step by step, I think it's just, if you have to define whatever you're going through, define kind of how you want to your expectations and how you want to proceed. Don't let others define it for you. And I think that, that gets us to the conclusion of the book a little bit about, kind of, you set who you are and what you are, and how, what success means to you.
Right. And so you talk about, you got that notification like, hey, that's it. Like, okay, well now, do I still stay in? Am I going through a med board? But your leadership style, like you had, I call it the prior to the major event, current, you had a leadership style, but then after, now you're going to your next duty location. Did your leadership style change in and out of uniform, or was it like, was it more compassionate, like understand, like, wow, it could be others out there that's dealing with internal battles, or something that's internal that they're not sharing, but they're still showing up to work. They're still
Yep.
showing up for work.
I don't know if I had a leadership style when I was young. I don't know if I ever
Mhm.
thought about it. And I can't even explain it in words about how my leadership style changed. And I didn't think about my leadership style. I just thought about who I
Mm.
was, going through struggles like that, whether you think about it or not. That resilience creates a completely different person. I was definitely more confident. I fought for 9 months, plus all the other
Mm.
things that are involved in the book. And I come
Yep.
out, I think, is where now I truly know who I am. I've Cancer has tested me to every one of my limits,
Right.
mentally, physically. We talk about getting to Monterey and I can't even run around the block. I fall down and have to almost crawl home, right? Like physically, I am just destroyed. And that became a goal of mine. But I set that as a goal, right? That was my leadership. And
Mm.
it was just internal leadership, not even leading other people yet. How do I lead myself back to be somebody? How do I get to that med board? Because there's nobody in Monterey that's an aviator that's helping me with a med board either, right?
Right.
And so like you said, is that leadership style changes. And then once that slowly develops, then, you get back into the squadron and now you have troops underneath you and you need to
Yep.
lead them. And I think I used some of my stories as passionate kind of avenues to, like, this is, to help me be confident and know to get through it. I didn't share my story. The irony is I never shared much of my story kind of until I went to write the book. I felt almost embarrassed by it a little bit because, in the Navy, no one else went through it. And I think this is kind of the mental health things too, why people don't
Right.
talk, is you feel embarrassed. I felt
Yeah.
embarrassed at cancer because all these aviators had no sickness. They've never been really, other than, maybe a headache. And some of them have, don't get me wrong. But, I'm with a group of people who are on a timeline to get from point A to point B. And then you go, and it's a very stringent naval aviator kind of timeline.
Right.
And I didn't hit those wickets. Bethesda and cancer and graduate school is not one of those milestones. And so I really kept it to myself because I didn't want to take myself out
Mm.
of my own running. And I think that can really relate to a lot of people that are afraid to speak up when they just don't feel right or something's not right. And I really wanted to touch on that because if it did it again today, I think I would have spoke up, even if it took me out of naval aviation, just for my mental health. I struggled myself internally for a long time.
Right. So some of the lessons that you had, like for the 9 months, and you're going through your treatment. So just so everybody know, for our listeners, we're talking about the Unbreakable Wings. So if y'all could just imagine Unbreakable Wings. So we're up 50,000, 40,000 feet in the air. And so I started looking into aircraft, like, wow, I didn't realize it doesn't take a lot to cut through the air, right? As long as you know airspeed, wind, direction, to keep the flight, if it's turbulence, you're either gonna go above or below, just depending on the current. Not the current, what is it called in aviation? Like the the jet stream, right? Like I guess it depends on how turbulent it is. Like, how did you kind of drop down to a level to where the stick wasn't shaking so hard? Like, it's like, okay, you know, like how when we're flying, you get the seatbelt sign, gets the ding goes on, you take the seatbelt off, but then you hear the pilot. Everybody, please buckle up. You know, we're going through some turbulence. So how did that play effect? Because that's why I keep thinking about, you know, as an aviator, and that's what I meant by like using some of your training that, oh, wow, I'm about to have some turbulent times. So let me drop to a different elevation so I could kind of have a smoother flight pattern.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been to a lot of turbulent activities, and military planes are built. We're not built to go above, to especially the P3. It's much more rigid wing, and most of our missions were 1,000 feet or below because we hunt submarines and we look for ships. And so, not until we kind of get overland with some of the Iraq stuff and the Middle Eastern stuff where we high. But otherwise, when we're doing our normal ASW mission, we did some drug ops in the Caribbean. We're at 1,000 feet or below, and it's really turbulent down there, right, where the air is thick and heavy and a lot of atmosphere. And I think a lot of that is you just kind of like in the plane too. You just have to assess your situation. You have to keep in your safety margins, right? Like when it gets too turbulent, you're not flying through thunderstorms, you're not flying through downdrafts. You're definitely not flying through hail because you don't want that to destroy the airplane and to come back and then have to talk to the boss about why the front of the airplane is all beat up and smashed. And you got people behind you. That's part of the aviation with the multi-crew is, when I'm flying the plane, it's not just me in the plane. There's 10 other people. That's 11-person crew on the P3. And, their comfort in the back, sometimes it's a joke and I hit some turbulence and, bounce them around a little bit. But, we're all together and we're a team. And I think that teamwork more than the aviation and the altitude and the turbulence is having that multi-mission air crew with 11 people. When you're on a 6-month deployment, you spend all your time together. You really become a family. And I started that right before I was diagnosed, and that really stuck with me. I really wanted to get back to the family. Even in Monterey, and I was studying mechanical engineering, and I could have got out of the Navy easily. With my medical history, it wouldn't have been hard. And at the time, it was the tech boom in San Jose, and there was a couple of job offers for some good money. I'm like, this is my dream. I'm not giving up my dream for a paycheck. But I knew I had to fight. I knew I would have to go through turbulence to get back, and some extreme turbulence, and it really was. But I've been there before in the plane. So to kind of answer your question, right? I saw the turbulence up ahead, but I'm like, if I want to get back to my dream and fly airplanes, I need to go through this.
Got to go through it because sooner or later you'll get through it. And man, when you're so drained, like your orange light was on, you're like, man, I just needed to make it to the next gas station or to the next refueling point. And that's when that restoration, your faith and your inner fuel, it's like when that orange gas tank light come on, you're like, okay, I got this in reserve. What role did spirituality play into your recovery process?
What role did what play? Sorry.
Like your faith and like, okay, it's time to recover. Okay, I'm so drained. I got the news. I'm is in remission or whatever. Now I need to push forward.
I had a lot of faith. There's spiritual and there's faith and religion, and I don't need to get that, but I definitely had faith in mind. And I think it was when I was about ready to give up on chemo, and there's a story about me driving 6-7 hours to see Niagara Falls, right? Just because I'm like, it was just one of those days, like I just got to do something because
I'm just not getting a car and drive.
I'm done. So I'm just going to get a car and drive. What's the coolest thing around? I'm like, I've never seen Niagara Falls. Let's go see Niagara Falls, right? I'm sick as a dog. I'm stopping to throw up out the door, right? And things. But I get there, and there was something majestic about walking and hearing the water, and then you see the falls. And, however you think of faith, to me, that was kind of my, like, there was something there that you can feel, tangent, gives you the goosebumps. You're like, I can do this, right? And so that was kind of faith. In a very strange way. What took me 7 hours to Niagara Falls from Bethesda, Maryland on a whim, just to stand there for 30 minutes or less and then just drive all the way back home. I mean, today it seems ridiculous. I would never do that. But at the time, I'm like, I have to do this, right? It was like, I just have to do this. I don't know why. I just do. And then, and then I get to Monterey and I'm so physically drained. I can hardly run around the block. Mentally, I have chemo brain. It's really hard to study. It's just different. Like chemo does a lot of stuff to your body. My brain doesn't work. I don't have I can't picture images in my mind anymore. I have to
Right.
learn how to think differently. I still have a disfluency when I talk, if you can't tell. You didn't know me before, but like it just, the words don't flow out the same. So I have to kind of learn how to talk. I have to learn how to remember differently. I have to compartmentalize and, but I still had faith. And then one day in Monterey, and I went to church, and I go to church and I get a speeding ticket. And I'm like, I think I'm done with faith. I got a speeding ticket going to church. I'm never going to church again. And, to be honest, I didn't go to church for the longest time. Like my faith now is a pair of running shoes. And to be honest, that's been the best faith. As growing up, I was a runner. I was a really chubby, fat kid out of the farm, and I cross country really found my way, and I slimmed up, and I went to state, right? And so there's always been something when I put running shoes on and go for a run. Thoughts that never come somehow come when the runner's high shows up, and you're 4 or 5 miles into a run, and and so it's kind of like, why am I sitting at church? Not that I didn't like church, but I just never felt what I felt when I went for a run. And so my faith comes in different ways. Everybody has their own way of celebrating their own faith. And to me, sometimes it was triathlons and running shoes and getting on a bike and just looking around and feeling the cold air and seeing Monterey and the sights. And, there was a lot of faith there to get me through. And I think I needed some of that.
Yeah, because I know some people like, man, you ain't never run no marathon. Like, I have my medals to show, but to a lot of what you said there, it's like you said that running it gets you, especially when you get to that wall. You know what I'm talking about?
Yep.
When you get to that wall, everything starts to cramp up, and then you pull out your gel pack or something, and you get through and you break through that wall, and you feel like you could go, double your distance, or you go a little bit faster, just breaking through. And we talk about breaking through in chapter 7 when you speak about the significance of post-recovery. How do we help other veterans do the same, or just humans? Like, how do we help other humans do the same when they come and face something and they feel like, man, this is it. Like I can't move forward, but then now they break through that wall and they're on the other side, like that post-recovery.
So it's expectation management again, right? So for every listener out there, when you get through whatever it is you're thinking through, cancer, whatever, what are you expecting on the other side? I was expecting to go back into the squadron and it would be just like I left, right? Oh my God, this is fun, very receptive. It was anything but. I think the first words with one of my peers was, what the F are you doing here? You shouldn't be here. Your record is terrible. I'm like, it was just adversity all the way. And so I didn't expect that. That was a wake-up call for me, as my military record now was tarnished because it had 3 to 4 years of events with Bethesda, Maryland and Monterey and postgraduate school that aren't on a normal record. They don't see people coming back into aviation like I did after a 3-year hiatus. And where do they put me back in, right? So I'm a senior person coming back. And so that transition sometimes in my mind, it was going to be easier, but it was actually harder than the chemo itself. I had to find the balance between adversity and kindness. If I were to respond with the adversity I would receive, they would have got rid of me, right? That's not the person I want to be. So I had to learn when to just smile and when to kill them with kindness a little bit, and when to take the adversity and just want to remove myself from the situation and then focus on me. And I think that's what you're really asking is, I just focused on the things that I could control, right? When I got back in the squadron, I became the maintenance officer, and there's a long story to the maintenance officer and the planes coming back into the squadron. I could just focus on what I could control and my people that worked for me, and making the maintenance the best shop in the world, and making everybody be there that wanted to be there, not forcing them to be there, but they wanted to come hang out in my maintenance department because it was fun. They enjoyed the work. But again, control what you can control and just focus on that. I had to kind of push the adversity aside, as harsh as it was, as much as they were trying to hurt my career with some of the statements and some of the actions. I just moved forward.
And the best thing about moving forward, as a pilot, as any, even when you're doing your transition, or when you're going from one job to the next, or you're transitioning out the military, and in your chapter 8, I call it the flight check complete, right? We bring out the checklist, we start checking stuff off. Some lessons that carried forward until where you are now. If you could go back and speak to yourself from the beginning, when you was a young 20-something-year-old naval aviator, to the person you are now, what would you say? What would you tell that younger you?
I would tell myself to have more confidence in myself. I think I was a little bit of a follower. You go into flight school, there's people from all over the United States, right? We're all in this together, and you kind of follow your own pecking order. And I just, growing up on a farm, I think I was always told what to do, right? Like by grandpa and dad and the
Right.
uncles, and I just worked hard and put in the time. And so I didn't always necessarily have as much confidence in myself, or be a little more independent. And so I would tell myself that. The other thing is just enjoy the journey. I think a lot of the things that happen, right? There's a lot more in the book than we're unpacking,
Yeah.
right? Especially in college. And I had some lung issues and some other issues. And um, I really think that I just should have. I dwelled on it too much afterwards, and I think it affected my growth. I think I just needed to take it at the time, do like I did in cancer, and kind of push through, set an agenda, and move on. And I dwelled on it, and it really hurt me. But I think that's what I took away from the cancer is that confidence I needed. You talked about leadership style and becoming a different person, and so I've kind of coined the phrase that goes along with the book that says live life boldly and enjoy the journey, because I think that's
Yes.
just what you need to do, right? Like everybody goes through a different path, and my path was completely different than all the peers. And I didn't realize it, I didn't understand it, and I just didn't grasp it. Like, this is mine, right? Good or bad, different, favorable, unfavorable. I just have to live life boldly and enjoy the journey I'm on. And like I said, there's a lot of things I can't control, so good or bad, let's just have fun and move forward.
Let's just have fun and move forward. So for the people in the back, y'all heard it. Let's just have fun and move forward. And so when I was reading, I was going through the book, and I took down some 5 quotes that you put in your book, Derek. And for the ones, and we're gonna talk about how do they get a copy of the book, but I just want to share the 5 quotes that you put in there that resonated with me, and what I shared my story with you prior
Yep.
to this coming on. But one of the things you said was courage isn't always about charging forward. It's also standing still and facing what you can't control.
Yep. That's kind of the adversity we talked about is,
Yeah.
you just kind of stand there and face it, and stand in front of a dartboard and watching the darts come at you, right? It's how are you going to move? If I were to charge forward, I think I would have charged forward negatively, created a scene, um, destroyed friendships. And so sometimes that word courage is different to different people. And sometimes you got to find out what that courage means. And sometimes it's not looking the best. Sometimes it's looking maybe like a coward in the face of others, but it doesn't matter. My courage was to stand and stay nothing, because that was harder for me as a guy with so much integrity coming out of chemo and so much drive. I'm usually the guy that likes to speak up and move forward. And so it was courage to kind of keep quiet and just face it.
Exactly. The other thing you put in the book, and I wrote down, I highlighted, when you float in combat, you don't expect the fight of your life to come from inside your own body.
Yeah, it's not just the tumors, right? Like you expect again, what expectation management you think about is like,
Yeah.
there's gonna be hard flights, my ground job's gonna be hard, I'm not gonna get any sleep. And then when you're diagnosed and they take a small tumor out of your neck, and you're like, how do I fight this? How do I fight something in the dark that I can't see? And then so
Right.
you think about it's just the chemo, right? So, okay, the chemo is going to kill the cancer. And so I'm fighting something I can't control with a fluid. But the other fight is just the mental fight, right? Like you don't
Mhm.
know how to fight your own kind of negative thoughts. The physical stuff you can kind of work out, but it was really hard to fight that, without being able to see it.
Right. The other one you put in there. Like I said, these are 5 powerful quotes that affected me, that align with what I went through, right? The other one's like, there's no checklist for emotional turbulence, but you can still train for the unexpected.
Yep. The emotional turbulence is a different part of the book. I won't release because I don't want to kill the whole entire roller
Yeah.
coaster of ups and downs, right? And so I always felt like every time I was kind of coming out of one thing and feeling really confident, just out of the blue, something else would happen and just take me down. And I don't know, even if I were to prepare for it, if you don't see it coming, I don't know if I would have been able to prepare. But you just have to deal with it. You have to find that courage to, okay, this is the situation, man. This is my journey. How am I going to get myself out of this?
Right. The other thing, you never stop being a leader. You just find new ways to lead.
Yep. And leadership is different. As you know, in the military, every 3 years, you
Yeah.
change different command, and
Yeah.
it's not a static leadership style. You're not like, I'm leader A and I'm going to go in every job and be leader
Right.
A.
It's different.
You,
Yeah.
it's
Different
different every time. The,
personalities,
the people are
different
different. The
mission.
personalities are different. You're in a different position. You might be a secondary
Yeah.
leader. Now you're the top leader. And so even that changes from CO to XO and other jobs. but you never leave or depart from your leadership style, right? Those foundational elements that make you who you are. You want to be kind but forceful, right? Like you want people, you want your followers to follow you because they like, not they like you like socially, but they respect you as a person.
Right.
You give them what you need, you give them opportunity, you tell them nice job when they did something great. But you're right, your leadership style changes a little bit. Sometimes it takes you a while to figure that out. Sometimes you just never figure that out. I don't know if I would have been a good leader without going through cancer again. I think that made me into something I couldn't even envision beforehand. Not that I
Right.
want to do it again. Trust me, I don't want to do it again, but you got to take
Right.
something good from the bad, right?
Right.
That's part of the book too, is even in the worst moments, how do you find something to take away that's positive for the future?
And the one that I like put triple asterisks by it and circled and highlighted. Healing doesn't remove your scars, it just teaches you how to carry them.
Yeah. Let's talk about just the physical scars, right? The ones you
Yeah.
see is there's always a reminder there of where it is. And that scar could be, I'll say it like we talk physical scars, but sometimes a song, the songs that were on at the time will take me right back to that moment in chemo. Is maybe a popular song or something I listened to. I talk about the whole Third Eye Blind album because that's the only CD I took with me. And every morning I got up, my routine is push play. That first song came on. So when that song comes on the radio, just unexpectedly, like I take a few second pause and it zaps me right back. And, in a millisecond, all those emotions of chemo kind of go through my body a little bit. And so but you got to enjoy that journey, right? That's what makes each of us unique.
So for the listeners out there, don't forget to like, subscribe, pass this on. But Derek, how do they get a copy of your book? Because those are the 5 things I took away from your book that I have, that, like I said, I shared with you, my journey and stuff that would resonate with me. So I know when others get a copy of your book, they're gonna see some stuff in there. Like, wow, Derek went through that. Oh, wow, he wrote that. I was thinking the same thing. Like, how do they get a copy of your book? Where do they go? How do they connect with you?
Yep. I definitely, my biggest account is probably LinkedIn. So if you go linkedin.com and my name's right there, Derek Adametz, and look me up, and there's always some posts about the book and kind of the journey along the way. And I like to share some of the stories that didn't make the book, but there's still good stories that associate with the book. And then to get a copy of the book, Amazon.com is by far the easiest. If you put Unbreakable Wings and my last name or Cancer and Aviation, that will definitely pop up. Barnes and Nobles is another one, and both those places have it in all 3 formats. So you have hardcover, paperback, and then Kindle for the Kindle readers as well. You can get it there. And enjoy it. Leave feedback of the book. I'm interested to hear what people think. I love I love to hear how it relates. I love the quotes, because some of the quotes I just wrote that they didn't resonate with me, but everybody has different quotes they pull from the book, especially at the end where I really tried to not just tell the story, but the last chapter really kind of changes person and reflects on the journey. And that's kind of where the quotes come and kind of gives people advice. And like this podcast explains maybe a little bit of how I got through it and what I would take away if I were to do it again.
And this is a perfect transition for the VET S.O.S podcast network. Remember, you do not have to drown in the sea of transition. Grab that VET S.O.S Lifeline. Grab a copy of Derek's book. Look, Unbreakable Wings, right? It's going in my collection, and I guarantee, and this is why I challenge myself. So every book I get, I put down a date, and then a year later, I go back and see, like, how is it speaking to me differently, right? Because, it's going to be a year. I'm going through a lot more stuff in 12 months, and I'm go back and look at like, wow, this resonates with me, so I call it a living, breathing document, right? So it has no expiration date, right? So this book will be around, forever, right? It's on, as we say, is in the interweb now. Is you get the old school way, hardback, paper copy. If you want the new school way, digital, he has it for you. So just link with Derek. Thank y'all for connecting. Thank y'all for tuning in, and don't forget to keep pressing forward and live for tomorrow, because tomorrow will never come, because tomorrow is today. Until next time, everybody. Peace.
Thanks, Kingsley.